Okay. Well, we're almost at the end of the book of Genesis. Almost.
Yay!
And as I mentioned in the email, although the reading will be completed, there will be a few more discussions that we'll be entering, just so that we get a little more insight into everything. I'm always afraid that when we go through any of our readings in this much detail, we may miss some of the messages. Okay, because that's the one problem I can see, because we're not keeping up with just commentaries about each parsha. We're dealing with commentaries about each word or phrase or verse, and it can distract our thinking from the main messages that we are to get from reading this book. And so that's why I want to extend our sessions out a little more. And then what do we feel we have learned from all of this endeavor at the very end? Okay.
That's a good idea.
So that's what, and then surprisingly, it will take us into the next book. Okay, so let me read our opening prayer in English. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. You have sanctified us through your commandments and have commanded us to busy ourselves in things of Torah. Amen.
Amen.
So the last, I believe we left off at Genesis 50, verse 18. I think that's where we pick up today.
Sounds right.
Is that right?
I think so.
Okay, Gail is shaking her head. So I guess that is a good sign. And what I would like to do is to, okay. What I would like to do is, if somebody would care to start reading, David, please.
Okay.
Okay, and then I saw David's hand go up first, Michael. So you'll pick up next. You'll pick up next.
Right.
So,
Okay.
so David, if you would like to begin the reading.
And his brethren also went and fell down before his face. And they said, Behold, we are thy bondmen. And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God?
Okay, let's stop at that point. What I'm sure someone has a different reading of this. And if somebody, Michael, or yeah, go ahead. Pastor Bruce or Michael, either one. Did you want to read, Michael? Your version? Because the wording may be a little different.
You're mute, Mike.
Michael, you're muted. Michael, you're
18.
muted.
18?
Yes.
Yeah,
18 and 19.
Okay. His brothers went to him themselves, flung themselves before him, and said, We are prepared to be your slaves. But Joseph said to them,
Wait a minute. Okay, that's it. That's it. So the wording may be different. Does somebody have a slightly different wording to this? What is your opinion of this? Why do you think this is going on? We know that the brothers have said Forgive, I urge you, the offense and guilt of your brothers who treated you so harshly. Therefore, please forgive the offense of the servants of God of your father. And Joseph was in tears as they spoke to him. And then we begin our reading today. So obviously they're worried. What are they worried about? Okay, first Gail and then Chris.
Well, Friedman's commentary is
Sure.
kind of interesting. He says, and I quote, "This is the final ironic recompense in the chain of deceptions in this family. The brothers who once sold Joseph as a slave now say that they will be his slaves."
Right. That is right out of. I have a very similar commentary on that. Yes, yes, please, Chris.
Yes, good morning. I just was thinking now that they are afraid because the only person that can really protect them was their father from the wrath of Joseph. So now that is gone. So they are really at the mercy of their fears, not necessarily of Joseph, but of their fears of what they have done. That's what I see here.
Good point also. Michael, did you, before I recognize Pastor Bruce, Michael, did you have any opinions about what you read?
No.
Oh, okay. Pastor Bruce.
Just, I was thinking about the childhood dreams of Joseph coming true again with them bowing before him. It goes back even further than what we just mentioned, to the bowing of the brothers prostrating themselves before him once again. It's just happening. It's that idea of bowing down before Joseph. And yeah, I think that again in Genesis, this idea, what goes around comes around kind of idea is here certainly, about the repeated offer, because Judah did make that to Joseph, what, 2 decades was it? 20 years before this. So yeah, now they're thinking about it. And I agree with Chris that the dad was there to kind of be the buffer, and now there's no buffer, so they're offering again.
Very good. David? And then
Yeah,
Don.
I would like to make a suggestion that Joseph may be worried about the future, because even though they're in Egypt and the Pharaoh has treated them well, he may not really trust the situation as much as he'd like to. And he may be a little worried or even frightened about the future. And if he is, there's really good reason for it.
Yes. David, why do you say that there's very good reason?
Well, because what's going to happen as we go into Exodus is that there will be a new Pharaoh, and he will enslave the entire Jewish population and start one of the most important chapters of Jewish history.
Good point. Good point. And Joseph's actions, though, have strengthened the Pharaoh. Didn't say much about the Egyptian people other than they had a lot of stuff taken away from them in order to survive, for the majority to survive. And they may in turn blame Joseph for their woes after this Pharaoh is gone from the scene, which we know is what's going to happen.
Exactly.
Okay. Yes, Don.
Also, it's coming to the end of Genesis. It's kind of a pivotal point, the classic between justice and mercy. Joseph is put in that position, and I'm trying to, as he said, Marty earlier, trying to zoom in and zoom out from the text. I'm trying to read a lot of Egyptian history to see if there's any contextual overlap here. And so at that time, Egyptian religion was split into two parts, the religion for the royals and the religion for everybody else. So you have to assume that Joseph would be observing the royal customs, and they were real big on justice versus mercy.
Good points.
So it's interesting to read history around the Torah.
Yes.
Time again, right?
Any, yes, Joanne.
What concerns me is, or I don't quite understand why they are willing to be his slaves and not work with him, or the word slave is so strong. And I'm trying to get my head around what they really mean. And I can't come up with another word. I mean, I realize Joseph's in charge of the country, but I'm surprised they don't say, we are willing to be your helpers. We will do whatever we can. But the word slaves mean put me in chains and that kind of thing in my head. Anyone else have any other idea about the
Well,
word slave?
the answer to your question is the English translations are different. One is a bondsman, right? David read that they were in that English translation, it's bondsman. Now I know Rabbi Miri is here and I welcome her back. It is very important to know what the Hebrew word is. So
the
is it
Hebrew word, it's avadim, and that's what we sing in Pesach. Avadim ainu, we were avadim, ata b'nei chorim. So avadim is considered slaves. At the other side, I want to share with you that the word is the same root, la'avod, avadim, avodat Adonai. It's the work of God, which means serving God. So it's here we can look at that in two ways. I'm going to be your slaves. I think, Joanne, that it might be just to use the highest way that I can say, I'm yours. I'm yours. Now, if I say I'm yours, means I belong to you. So, the Torah is full of exaggeration, so it could be one of those. But it's interesting that being slave and working God is the same root.
interesting? Yes, Pastor Bruce.
But 19, Joseph really says, am I a substitute for God?
Right. That's what since you already mentioned it, please.
And it was that part was read by David, but not Michael. But the thing about it is, who do we belong to ultimately?
Right.
Ultimately, Joseph knows.
Yes. Yes. Yes, Chris.
Yes, I'm going on a different route here. I think this statement could also be that that's how they felt. That's how they saw themselves as with all their failures in their life together. They saw that there was they could not be equal with Joseph. They have to at least be their servants. And a scripture comes to my mind that on the book of Joshua, when they are, and I'm going way ahead of the time, but that's the same thing where the spies went on to look at the city that God had promised to give them. They say, these people we are like grasshoppers, instead of they are giants before us. So that's how they saw. That was the concept that they used. And I feel like this is pretty much similar to it, that it's not really that we are slaves, but that we feel like slaves, because that's the best we can do from from our own eyes. They have goofed up so much that they was the least they could do be slaves. That's another point that I'm seeing. And when we see ourselves that little, we are going to be little. That's what I'm thinking, you know.
Very good. Yes, Don, I think your hand is up, and then I'm going to read something.
Yeah, it's still like over 400 years before the Exodus. And it's a long time before the Hebrews are fully enslaved in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Egypt has got lots of slaves. And it's not certain that Joseph's brothers would have to join their ranks as ordinary slaves. And I also see Joseph as Judaism has not really been revealed at Mount Sinai yet, not for half a millennia. And so there's very little what we're familiar with in Judaism yet. So I just see Joseph as being more royal Egyptian than Hebrew. There's not a lot of Hebrew material to embrace. I mean, Jacob, after wrestling with the angel, received a divine charge to form Judaism. And he really hasn't had a chance because most of his sons are scalawags and crooks, and can't trust them. And except for Joseph and Benjamin, there's not much there yet to redeem Jews.
Okay.
So-
Does anyone want to comment about what Don has been saying? Don, throughout all of this, Joseph never fails to respect, honor, forget his heritage and the teachings that he had, that God is supreme over everything and that there is a greater plan. Even he has described that in his various wordings of everything. It's God's interpretation of my dreams. It's not me. And little by little, he's coming to. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but he even comes to realize in the very next sentence, okay, that this whole design is God's design, not what his brothers intended, but what God intended, so that certain things can occur. And in doing this, I think that he is very Jewish, if you will, as opposed, yes, his strength at this point is Egyptian, but his physical strength is Egyptian, but his spiritual strength, I believe, is still a belief in God, as we eventually will see God, as you point out, in 400 years from now. But I think he's seeing God in the same light as Jacob and also Isaac and Abraham. It's going to be mentioned very shortly.
But That could also be strengthened because at the time the Egyptians were monotheistic. Ra was the supreme god. So it wasn't as if he had to work too hard to stick with the Hebrew.
Well, I have also heard that I have also read, as well as listened to lectures on this, that that all of Genesis and Exodus is a buildup of the god, the moon god versus the sun god. I have heard that. I've read about that. I do not, and I do know that there was a pharaoh that believed in the moon god as opposed to the sun god. I also know, but the timings are just not exactly the way the anthropologists and the archaeologists have discovered. So all I can say is that I'm just taking it right from the book. I don't want to read much into it other than say that based on the behavior and what has been told to us, I just walk away with the idea that Joseph strongly believes in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's going to come out very shortly.
Yeah, certainly looks that way so far.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Joanne.
It's almost as if there's the Egyptians, their God, and how they live, what their 10 commandments are. And then there's his brothers, and some of them are scallywags, as we know. And then there's Joseph, and it's like he's in a bubble that isn't quite real. I mean, it's like
It's surreal.
it's like he understands a God of his forefathers, and it's almost like he's got a drop of extra goodness maybe in him, or foresight that other people don't have. He's an
Good point.
amazing story.
Good point.
Amazing.
Good point. Any other comments before we move on? Because what we're going to read now is, I just wanted to mention another way that we're discussing, and this is from the Sarna, S-A-R-N-A commentary about this. And basically, I'm just going to summarize a little bit. He says, Joseph had earlier tested his brothers. Now they challenge him, even though they are wholly in his power. So what does this get after? The commentary states this with asking a question. Will the base human desire for revenge triumph over nobility of character?
Can you say it again, please?
Yes. Will the base human desire for revenge triumph over nobility of character? And this is now what weighs upon Joseph. Okay, their question causes this, and so he has to answer, and this is his choice now. Does he yield to base desires or nobility of character? Yes, Pastor Bruce.
We don't have a timing issue about this conversation per
Right.
se. But I would assume he didn't contemplate for hours what he was going to say.
Right.
This is not like there's a big pause here or something. And so you know, obviously the answer, I think the question that you just asked, it has an obvious answer.
Yes.
I think his character, when you go through verses, 19, have no fear,
That's right.
and you go into the next part, that's the very famous passage that lots of people quote, and there's many, many songs that have been written about that particular verse, 50 verse 20. In fact, I even think that the song in the musical Wicked, For Good, comes out of there.
Yeah.
That's the way I feel about it anyway. But yeah, I think that his nobility and everything that happens here is all about, I even think that when you look back at the quote that we use so often in life, to err is human, to forgive is divine.
Divine. Yes.
That's not, people think that's in the Bible. Well, it's really, the theme is in the Bible, but that word, the wording is not in the Bible. It's just a phrase. But, obviously, Joseph was with God. God was with Joseph, and he chose to forgive, which is very divine.
Good way of putting it. Good way of putting it. So we sort of.
Marty?
Oh yeah, yes.
Okay.
Please, Rabbi.
Well, I think that Yosef already took revenge of them. He made them suffer. He really, when they had to come and to go, and he hid the cup and he didn't tell them. So the issue of revenge already had come back. Now he emphasizes time after time that he operates about what God is telling him. He's only a slave of God, a puppet of God. So whatever he does, it's not him, but it's God. But now I want to share with you an anecdote. Some of you probably heard from me already. When I was living in Israel, we had only one car, which is common, and I was dying to have a car of my own. I was working, etc. Eventually, I got a car that was 20 years old. It was a Fiat 500 or 600, which means it was this size, and 20 years old. And I was in heaven. I lived on 4th floor, and one night my car was stolen. And guys, what I felt, I was noble, I was not novelty. I thought I'm a good person. And all of a sudden, I wanted the thieves to have such an accident that they really suffer. Later on, when I realized that I basically wanted revenge, and I was stunned to see that I carry that kind of feeling. It was very upsetting to me that I want revenge. I really wanted, but it struck me as a person that didn't think that that kind of characteristics is in my heart. So there is, I think, and this is my belief, that revenge might be one of those characteristics that are universal, that we all have, maybe just hidden and don't move towards it. This is my personal experience, and I did that. And as I said, Yosef is operating in the name of God. So whatever it does, it comes from God.
Good point. Yes, David.
It's actually Wendy.
It's actually me.
Oh, okay.
And
You didn't
Rabbi,
raise the other hand, David.
oh, shame on you. I'm also not in the picture anymore. Rabbi, after what you said, it brought back an anecdotal thing I always used to say when I was sort of growing up. I used to think I had a direct line from here up to up there, because usually anything I asked for was somehow always coming true. And at one point, I remember my cousin who waited to do everything at the last minute, and we were applying for college. And I worked as far as I could, like doing all the steps to do it. And at the last minute, he applied to the same school. And I was thinking, this isn't fair. I worked very hard to get this. I don't think he should get this too. Well, not only did he not get accepted to the school, this college I was going to, he didn't get accepted anywhere until the very, very end of the summer, where, you know, he did go because he played baseball. But my point was that after I realized that I was the one who caused him to not get accepted to the college I went to, I thought, I'll never, ever, ever ask for anything negative again. That scared me, that I almost cost him his college career.
Oh, you don't have that kind of power.
I know I don't, but it worried me to the point that I said, okay, no more negative thoughts about anybody ever.
And while we are at it, Wendy and I would love to welcome Rabbi Miri back to our group. We hope you had a wonderful vacation and journey away from here. And we're delighted that you're back to the land of Canaan, the land of Arizona.
Thank
Oh,
you.
golly.
You know, what I shared with you about revenge, think about how in English or American, it says what's going around comes around. That's revenge. That's, you know, whatever you're doing, it's going to come to you. So anyway.
Good points. Good points and
There's one other
good
thing.
anecdotes.
Thanks. There's one other point that I wanted to make while I still could grab the floor. And that is that one of the things that we're doing here at the very end of Genesis is harking back to the beginning of Genesis. And specifically, this is why I love the Dr. Hertz interpretation and commentary, because they're talking about the creation of light. Because God said, let there be light, but this is quite a bit of time before God creates the sun. And so the question comes up, well, how can there be light if there's no sun? And then he has the wisdom to quote Edmund Halley, who wrote that the nebular theory, the nebulas that were formed before the sun, were providing light in the universe. I'm not sure if he's correct on that, but I think it's a wonderful juxtaposition at the beginning of the book of Genesis that we're now harking back to at the end of the book of Genesis. Thanks.
Well, I'm very glad that you brought up the book of Genesis. Do you remember, and I have mentioned this over the past several times over the past 3 years, what is God's answer to Cain? To Cain's question, am I my brother's keeper? Yes, Chris? You're muted, Chris.
No, I was going to say that. Am I my brother's keeper?
Yeah, that's right.
Or
That's exactly right. And there is no answer. With that in mind, the comment, have no fear, am I a substitute? Hi, Helene. Am I a substitute for God?
Ruth Ann did it. Thank you.
Very good. We're in a discussion concerning Joseph's answer to his brothers. Okay. And we're talking about Cain, the story of Cain and Abel, and Cain's question of God, am I my brother's keeper? And God never answers Cain. There's a huge gap. And now we're starting to say, what about revenge? That was Cain's motivation.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Well, what do we see here? As was voiced by Sarnoff when he says, will the base human desire for revenge triumph over nobility of character? What does God expect of us?
To overcome.
Yes, to overcome the base fear.
That desire to revenge, the desire to do evil, the desire to
That's right.
keep up with everybody except just to stay focused on God and to keep our character on the same level to honor him.
Okay. Yes, Don. Very good, Chris.
I was going to start off facetiously, but I remember Archie Bunker said, "What's wrong with revenge? It's a perfect way to get even." What I was going to say is that the golden rule, that's at the very root of Judeo Christianity, and that really, to me, that really answers the question.
Don, can you say that again? I kind of didn't catch it.
Do not do unto others what you would not have to do unto you. To me, that's a good answer for Dane's question.
Good way of putting it. Good way of putting it. So there are a lot of teachings that stem from all of this. That's right. So yes, Helene.
I know, I'm so sorry, I came late with my computer, but doesn't God want us to make our own decisions?
Absolutely.
Maybe that question wasn't for him to answer. He gave us free will. Let us decide we are our brother's keepers. Can we ask God for every single little thing?
And that is the message of the Joseph story.
Is that right? Huh.
You summed it up very well. Yes, Chris, and I don't know, Ricky, is that a crocheting hand or raising it? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, Chris.
Yes, another thing that also happened during the Abel story, the Lord warns him in the same way he is warning the people during Joseph's time that we need to stay focused for what we need, because he says your heart is deceitful and it will exactly, let me remember how it's a quote. It said, don't let your heart be deceitful and remain, give me a second. I know I can read this faster than I can try to think about it. It is on the same story of Genesis when he says to Abel, to Cain, don't let your why this phrase, what you fall in, say to his brother Abel, and okay, do not know I am your brother's keeper. Then he said, what have you done? Hark, your brother's cried to me from the ground. Therefore, you shall be more cursed than the ground. Hold on. Oh, I think I lost it, but basically, I think I passed. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
It's before that.
It's possible.
It's before there, just a little bit.
Yes.
That you're looking for.
It says,
well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, here it is.
Yeah.
Surely, and why are you so distressed and why is your face fallen? Surely, if you do right, this is what I love about this
Yeah.
one. If you do right, there is an uplift. But if you do not do right, sin crouches at the door. Its urge is toward you, yet you can be its master. And again, it is true, Helene. It is a choice. But right here it starts with it is your choice. You can either make it go or be stuck with the vengeance and the anger and the evil thoughts, and then it will consume you. It
Good
will
point.
destroy you.
Very good point.
Thank you for waiting on me finding the script.
Okay. But I think, any other comments? These were all very good. Yeah, yes, Rabbi Mary.
I want to reply again to Joanne. I found, Joanne, that when Judah comes with the story about the cup that he puts in Benjamin's, stuff. Do you remember?
Yeah,
and they come in.
The wheat.
Yeah, and right. And what it says there, Yehuda, who represents all the rest of the brothers, he has been sent to Joseph, to save Benjamin. And he says, if you, let me see the translation so you get that. So Judah says, what can we say to my Lord? This is Stone, Orthodox. How can we speak? And how can we justify ourselves? God has uncovered the sin of our servants. We are ready to be slaves to my Lord. Both we and those in that the goblet was found.
Right.
So even at that point, it talks about, we're going to be your slave. Just let us go. Don't take Benjamin from his father, blah, blah, blah. So already there. So I believe, Joanne, that it's a type of phrase of being so humble, so little, that it looks like a slave. When my kids were small and I said, what's the difference between slave and your mother? I worked as hard, and then we came to the issue of belonging. I don't belong, well, my ex-husband thought I belonged to him, but that's another story. No one owes me. No one owns me. I work very hard, but no one owns me. And that's what a slave is. It belongs to someone. And they gave themselves, do with us whatever you want. When someone belongs, you can do with them whatever you want. And this appears in Genesis 44, verse 17. So you have to believe me. Sorry.
We believe
Okay.
you.
Any other comments? Oh, yes, Pastor Bruce.
Just the words English for slave. I mean, all the people slaved over the challah bread,
Yeah.
Get it ready. You slaved over something. In other words, you put your whole self into it and you made that your focus. There's all kinds of things that you can use with the English word, obviously. Slaved over a hot stove, slaved over the oven, slaved over the... we use the word kind of in a different way, but the idea is that you're wholeheartely doing something, working on something. You're doing anyway.
Okay. Yes, Gail.
I think when
And
you
then
use
Ricky.
I think when you use that phrase, sometimes you're implying that you're a victim.
Yeah.
You're not a slave, you're a victim.
Also, you're enslaved.
Good point.
And I was thinking that
Okay.
You slave over a hot stove doesn't mean I have my whole heart in it. It means I'm suffering through it. In
That's
a
the
way.
victim that she's talking about. You're the victim in that
That's
case.
the victim, right?
Self-inflicted victimism. Yes. Please, Michael. Yes.
Yeah, also it said that sometimes you hear you're enslaved into something. That means it's a very high passion.
Okay.
A negative attachment is not
Yes.
a passion, but it become obsessive compulsive. I must do it. I'm enslaved to this. I must do it. What voice tells you that?
Well,
Okay.
if
Very good. Yes. Okay, Michael, you just wanted to say something?
Yeah, in response to Rabbi Mary, I didn't mean it. I meant it as a passion. For example, if you're into music, it's you're enslaved to it. Right? Over saying it another way, that it's a passion. If you're saying it on a personal level, I would say it for myself with my music, because I have a very high passion to it. I'm enslaved to it. Not meaning that I'm a slave to it, but just as a passing comment.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Now, Ricky, then Don.
No,
Oh, Ricky, no, it was another.
I already threw it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Don.
Yeah, well, you can't have slaves without slaveholders. And I know one of my slaveholders is guilt. And I'm often a slave to guilt. But I think with passions, you use the word slave is more of a metaphor. I mean, you can be happily enslaved by, in Michael's case, music. Getting back to the basics, to be a slave, you have to be dehumanized by your slaveholder. You can no longer be a human. You're chattel property, and that's what happened to Hebrews. And in fact, in American history, it's hard to believe, really, that blacks were so dehumanized that they literally were property traded. And I'm sad to say that some of the slaveholders were Jewish in American history.
Right.
And it's hard to believe that after the Exodus, that Jews would ever hold slaves, but they did. I mean, they held slaves in Judah and Israel. There's something about human beings that have to dehumanize, and have to have inferiors and make people inferior. I mean, it's heart crushing, really, when how far it goes back.
Well, as we're going to read, you keep that in mind, but it will come up as to in Torah as to how we are to treat our slaves. Okay, and there are several passages that deal with this, and it is the word compassion comes to mind, and even the slave will have a choice, as we will read later on, as we will get into those books. Individuals have a way of using different devices to justify their own actions. That list is much longer, much longer than our Torah study group. It comes down to motivation and what people want to look for the examples to justify what they are doing. And so they will cite passages in literature, in the liturgy. They will cite political postures. They will cite all kinds of things, economic reasons, whatever. But is it really the entire picture? And one of the things that I think is that I've been learning about the teachings is that before we start to criticize, before we start to blindly accept, before we take actions, before we say things, we have to give thought to what the repercussions might be. They may come true when we didn't mean for that to occur at all. And we have to be very careful. And maybe we have to, another way of looking at this statement, that leaving it to God, just change with the word, leave it to time. Give yourself time to mull over the situation, not to take immediate action. To put it scientifically, let your brain's cortex rule over your midbrain. Okay? Because your midbrain is the part that says is your immediate response. And that's where revenge is harbored. Use your cortex and think about it more deeply. And I think so that's another approach to it. Yes, David. Yes, David. Oh, it's a Wendy hand. Yes, that's right. It's your left hand. It's your left hand, and you sit back to make room for her speech. Wendy, are you?
She's muted.
I think you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. This is just a very short statement, which I think will sum up what you're trying to say. When you listen to some of the politics that are going on, let's just look at it as if the army's got to go in somewhere, and they're making a plan as who, what, when, where they were going to do their attack and why. And then before they do it, somebody says, okay, now, who's this going to hurt? So they look at it from the other side before they just go in and blindly start shooting. They know how much and how, where, or whatever. So that's part of the decision. Who is it going to hurt?
That has to be thought about. It's looking into the future. That's right. Yes, Michael.
Yes, in regards to what Donald said about the Jewish slave owners, and I might need some help from Rabbi Mary on this, but if I can remember, whatever I can remember from this is that the Jewish slave owners, for the most part, were very good to their slaves that they had. And I think they were only permitted to have them for 7 years or something to that effect. And that they, in many cases, these slaves were treated like members of the family, and they did not want to leave after 7 years or something to that effect.
In some cases, yes. By the way, this discussion is summed up in a very, very good movie entitled The Price of Sugar. Okay. And I highly recommend it, and using this discussion to keep it in mind as you observe what happens in the movie. There'll be some very important, you'll see everything we've discussed in this movie. Okay, The Price of Sugar. Okay.
To answer to Michael, to your question, slaves were not treated as property. Slaves were treated as someone that could not pay their taxes. It's there is a word in English which I don't remember.
It's indentured servant.
And yes, yeah. And the difference between what we did in America is that when you send away the slave, he takes his family. And what the Jewish, they were not Jewish, the Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, follow the rules that we're going to encounter if we ever get there in Exodus, in the rules. It's not in the 10 Commandments, but it is in one of the commandments. How you treat the alien and how you treat the slave. The worst treatment was to the wives. They were shocking.
Wise guy.
They were really
I know where you're
shocking.
coming from. You know, I do.
I'm not feminist, but that's what
Yeah.
happened.
Just have a rider whenever you say I do.
No, guys, the word in Hebrew for husband is Baal, which is owner. Do you know the Yiddish Balbuste? Balbusted is a woman that owns a house and she runs the house. But that's a new Hebrew, a new Yiddish. But the word for husband today is Baal. It's not Ish. It's not my partner. It's Baal, owner. So I'm not joking. The one that got really mad at me when I mentioned that was Rabbi Becker. He moved to another topic because he didn't like that.
Yeah, I want to, excuse me for 1 minute. Betty, you're a balabusta. Betty. Just got it over here in the Zoom.
Oh, golly.
Thank you.
Okay. Suzanne and then Dawn, yes.
Yeah, it's just, this is a question for Rabbi Mary. When you say Baal, are you, would that be spelled B-A-A-L?
No. You can do that in English. Yeah, you know, in English you can do whatever you want to write Hebrew. But it sounds like Baal. The accent is on the ba, Baal. I would write it, Baal. Yeah, it could be. And we'll talk about that word again because it's something completely
We can have
different.
a tremendous wordplay between the story of Baal and Baal.
Right.
Okay.
We
so,
could have a story about that sometime, you know, discussion.
Okay, just so that I understand. So the spelling could be the same, but it's the pronunciation of it where you
put
the emphasis on the syllable. That
okay. Yeah. On the
Okay,
first
just a
syllable.
second, Ricky. Don has had his hand up.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
and let me say another thing that you might not like, but you should know. How a woman is how do you get a woman? And the Orthodox still go by that. You can do it by buying her with a ring that needs to be valued more than 2 cents or something, by a decree, by a contract, by writing it down. And the third word, if you have sex with her, the moment that you have sex with her, she belongs to you. And you know what it's called to have sex with her? Be'ilah, the same exact root as Baal. Baal, Be'ilah. So if he has sex with her, she belongs to him.
Fascinating.
Nice, huh?
Okay. Now, I don't want this to go, we're moving far afield from the original discussion. So if anyone who has their hands up can bring us back, okay, to the original discussion, and then we can move on. So Ricky, You've been
I just
waiting
wanted to say
patiently.
real fast to Susan that I sometimes see BAAL, but then sometimes it's BA''AL. And that's how I tell the
Okay.
difference between Baal and Baal.
Thank
If there's
you.
an apostrophe
Baal
between,
is the sex part. Yeah, it's the verb.
Okay, now let's make these very quick questions so we can get back to the text, okay? Because I think these others are dealing with the same subject. Don, and then Chris, and then that's it on this subject.
Thank you. Thank you.
I had my hand up before you wanted to bring us back, but I can't let it go without commenting on slavery again. You know, that there's an expression, damned with faint praise. You know, we had slaves, but we treated them really well. We had slaves, but, we let them go after 7 years. But the fact is, they were slaves, and slave it's a power issue. Somebody has absolute control of somebody else, and they make the rules. And I don't know how we ever free ourselves from that, because people just seem to do that. The first thing you do when you get power is you use it to control other people. Doesn't matter if it's corporations or armies or even religions. There's an inequality.
Well, Don, I always take exception when you use the word religion. It's certain individuals' interpretation. Okay, it's to support their own desire for power.
I didn't mean always.
It isn't granted by any religion.
No. Well.
Okay, power is frowned on.
Well, for example,
in other words, if I want to be the sheik in charge, I say the Quran gives me power. If I want to be the English king in charge, the Bible gives me power. Okay, but they're using it in a different way.
It's linguistic, yeah. It's however you.
But it is not. It is saying that all these books, they talk about something about slavery, and it's never in a positive fashion. It's usually if you have a slave, not that you have a slave. You're granted a slave. And I think that's a very important difference. That's what I mentioned. That's why I mentioned what I said before. We sometimes denigrate religion into, wars have been fought in the name of religion. No, man has made the decision to use the religion as an excuse.
Exactly. Well said.
It's another arrow in the quiver for power.
And so it is a total difference in that. And we're going to read. If we just look at a few words, we miss the point. If we put the entire 5 books in perspective, the arguments against going to war are also made in Torah. Okay, and it talks about those very specifically, but they're overlooked. They're not discussed, and we'll get to those. It's going to be a few years from now, but when we get to those portions, we will be able to see that yes, there are certain things that we have to, as human beings, think about before we make the decisions. That's what started this. We have to think hard. Okay, wait a minute. Helene usually has to, no, it's okay. Helene usually has to leave early. In case she has to leave early, I want to give her the floor.
Very kind to me, and I appreciate my physical condition. Okay, let's get back to the original and slavery. All this, I'm not talking about having slaves. We are enslaved. I think it was Michael who said he's enslaved to music. We have our own passions, and
Sure.
we are enslaved to our passions, art, whatever it may be, politics. But tell me something. When does the slavery become an addiction?
Ah, good point. Good point.
That's what you have to watch with your midbrain and your cortex. Ask your cortex to help you with that one. Your midbrain will say, oh, it's okay, Helene, you can have an addiction. But the truth is, if I have to answer fast, if I have to be emotional, I'm in trouble. And I have to be careful when I can't get on Torah reading, not to let my midbrain brain bother me. I have
That's right.
cortex. Oh, Ruth Ann will help me. And she
Except she
Okay.
was busy running
Now,
from place to place.
unless we can, Chris, are you going to bring us back to what we're reading, or is it going to be more of a discussion about slaves?
No, I forgot where we were reading. This is getting so good that we just keep rolling. But I like the comment, or Helene, but my problem was, before you become a slave, you are something else, and that's in love. Before you decide to give yourself into whatever, you are in love with whatever you are, in love with God, in love with your passions before you become a slave. So I think that's what we need to watch.
Yes, good point. Good way to end that. Okay.
No end.
Don't you want to
No
continue
end.
it? Okay, go
I
ahead.
just want to support something so you understand how Hebrew works. The word Eved, Avadimainu, the word Eved and the word Avodah, work, is the same root. So basically, let's say that you owe something. I mean, you broke a door of someone and he said, oh, pay for it. I don't have money. What can I do instead? Okay, I'm going to fix your garden instead of what I broke. So it's offering avodah, is offering work, and it's not belonging to you, but I need to do it because I did something wrong to you. So the word avodah is work. And the word eved seems to be the person that does the work. And now I'll shut up.
Okay, Grace. I take it the group wants to continue the discussion, and we'll let it go. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You have no power.
Well, I've been, observing, listening, and reading the commentaries, and it seems as though that Joseph is adhering to a higher code of ethics, and he's not going to allow himself to enslave his brothers.
Right on.
I just kind of wanted to bring us back to the story because I put it in the chat and I didn't hear anybody respond or see anybody respond to it. But in my eyes, he's just got a higher code of ethics, and he knows that it's wrong to enslave anybody because he's been so enslaved by his brothers and then the Egyptians, but yet he was treated very well in the Egyptian portion. So I'm just guessing that, he's learned a lot of lessons throughout all of this, and he's not going to enslave them for their misdeeds. He's going to let them learn their mistakes and do it differently. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Good points. Good points. Anyone else?
Let's read.
Okay. Okay. So I forgot where we left off. I think
19.
Verse 20, and I even forget who is reading.
Well, I'll take it because I like this sentence. Besides, although you intended me harm, God intended it for good so as to bring about the present result, the survival of many people.
Okay, let's
Yeah, stop there.
stop
Absolutely.
at this point because there's a lot that comes to mind with this.
Right.
So what, Ricky, what comes to your
Well,
mind as you've read this?
I think all of us have experiences that at the time seemed absolutely horrible, but later when we look back at them, they've become something good. I mean, it gave us our strength, our courage, or something was gotten out of whatever was that awful event. I have another one of my sayings. This isn't happening to me, it's happening for me. So when I get into a really bad, crazy situation,
Very interesting.
this is happening for me. What am I supposed to learn? What am I supposed to gain out of this? What feels right now as very horrible. So not happening to me, it's happening for me. That's it.
Interesting.
That's my opinion.
Any other comment? That's a good way of putting it. Any other comments about what Ricky had to say or what we just read?
Joseph, I was going to say
Go
Joseph
ahead.
has a great understanding of the sovereignty of God in this particular passage.
Yes. I think it's very interesting in itself. If we tend to look at things that certain events are bad events and just dwell on the bad event, yes, it's a bad event.
Right.
But sometimes a bad event leads to something good. Sometimes it's just the reverse. Sometimes we say, oh, this is tremendous. And it may lead to a whole string of bad events. So we just don't have the ability to look out far enough. So Ricky had her hand up and then Michael.
Well, I think it's a Buddhist tale where the father had a son and a horse showed up. And isn't that good? You got a horse. Well, let's wait and see. Well, the boy rides on the horse and falls and breaks his leg. Oh, that's a bad thing. No, let's wait and see. The generals come through and want an army, but don't take the son because he has a broken leg. So it's a good thing. And this fable or tale, whatever you want to call it, goes on, and every single thing that seems good or seems bad, the father just says, let's wait and see how it turns out.
Right.
Oh.
Yes, Michael.
That's called unforeseen circumstances.
Right.
Or unforeseen possibilities. As something good comes out of, you're thinking this is a good thing to do for whatever. You don't know what it's going to bring. It could bring more good, or it could bring some negative stuff down at the end of the road.
Good point. Any other comments about that? What about the term collateral damage?
What about collateral?
It's used very often, not just in warfare. Yes, Don.
Yeah, that's kind of tied to the law of unintended consequences,
Yeah.
where you get a lot more than you wanted. None of it good.
Very good point. Okay. Yes, Joanne, and then Michael again.
Collateral damage is the fact that I live in Dayton, Ohio. The Air Force, Red Patterson, is here. And the planes flying into Afghanistan were flying out of here. All those people are now on base, and they have gone from very quiet COVID to bright red because all those people came back. Collateral damage.
Yeah. Any decision that we make, the unintended consequences, but so we have to be careful. Is it so when they say use the term collateral damage, does it always mean intended purposes, or does it just, unintended purposes, or is it just the words that people are using to soften the blow?
Justified.
By changing the words, you soften the true meaning of what's it's softer than unintended consequences. Yes, Michael. Okay, Michael and Gail.
Yeah, I was just going to say where it would come from. Many times, or too often, collateral damage comes from gossip. Can come from gossip. You get something. You get something wrong. You're talking about another individual, and you don't hear it right. You get it wrong. That could lead to collateral damage.
Very well put. Unintended consequences of gossip. Yes. Yes, Gail.
Yeah, I think what you were talking about is civilians were killed during an attack during war. And rather than saying the innocent people were killed, they say collateral damage. I mean, it sounds so much nicer.
Sure. Yeah. Because it also, it's another way of erasing the human that was killed.
Right.
They're no longer, they're just a thing.
Right.
They're just things.
Yeah, it's that knot, and I always refer to it as a knot. And the knot is when you use the terms us and them. And them is a horrible word. It just leads to all kinds of awful, awful things. And I don't care whether you're talking about how you treat people or animals or the earth. It's when it's us and them, and you dehumanize them.
Dehumanitize, yes.
Right. But whether it's earth or an animal or whatever, it's a less than, it's a them. Doesn't matter. It's a them. It's not us.
Good point. Good point.
The other.
Yes, Joanne.
I'm going back to my word slave and what it means in old Egypt. And Joseph's brothers are saying, we are prepared to be your slave. In other words, what they did in the past is collateral damage toward Joseph at that moment.
It's another way of looking at it. Yes, that's the whole point. That they had in their minds justified reason for doing what they did.
Yeah.
Okay, and they could list everything. They had a whole list of reasons why they did what they did. However, they were unable to see they couldn't imagine the consequences of what they were doing. Okay, so in Judaism, and Rabbi Mary, you may be able to discuss some of this. Part of Torah, it's not just man's relationship with God. It also or God's relationship with man. It also deals with, and this is from commentary too, man's relationship with his fellow man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so it could be one man and versus another man, or man and his community, or nation versus other nations. So I know Pastor Bruce had his hand up, and yes, and Ricky then. Okay, yes, Pastor Bruce.
Well, just what you're saying is pretty clear when it comes to, as we get into more of Torah, we're going to get into the very specifics of the commandment of loving God and loving your neighbor. I mean, it's very specific, and how the commandments are even divided into 5 about loving God and 5 about loving your neighbor. I mean, it's all there. I mean, it's just, it's there. And so I think that as you look at, as we're going to be going on here, hopefully past Genesis today.
Indeed. I don't know if we're going to get there. We'll try.
Ruth Ann had every right to ask a question in her little letter to everyone. But anyway, I'm just saying that I think that obviously those are things that are very important here and very important through all of Scripture. So
Good point. Good point. Yes, Ricky.
2 points, but real fast before I get to my point. We're going to have to speed this up. If you figure average age of this group, and we have 4 more books to go through at 3 years per book, are we all going to be here when we get through the 5 books of the Torah? Anyway, that's, it's just, 3 years to get through 1 book. Okay.
I get the hint. I get the hint from everyone.
and so
Speed it up.
it's a lovely connecting phrase. And so
Okay.
on the topic of what we're talking about, a struggle that I went through in my own life at a point was, if this is God's intention, the intentional will of God, I don't want anything to do with God, because, God let bad things happen. And that's the way I viewed it as a child, when bad things happen to good people, that title. But if you stay in and forget, or put aside the intentional will, what becomes later the consequential will? And that's what I wanted to bring up, is God didn't intend bad things to happen, but since bad things are happening, what can God make out of it? And that becomes the consequential will. What were the consequences of that bad thing that turns that bad thing around? But you got to wait. There's usually some time involved in between the 2 events in my book. So that's what I wanted to say on consequence.
Okay. Good point. Yes, Michael.
Someone mentioned a softening effect a couple of minutes ago in reference to something, and I can't remember.
It was the term unintended consequences.
Okay, right.
Okay.
And so I mentioned that I've mentioned this before, and you'll recognize it, Marty. The softening effect between perish and murder.
Yes, you brought that up. That's why that dovetails into that. That's right.
And it really is perish. It would be more of a conclusion, because it's not stating how, for example, the 6 million Jews perished. How did they perish? So it's really a softening effect.
Yeah. So the choice of words that we use can sometimes not convey the true emotional impact of the event.
Well, not only that, but the honesty of the event.
I understand where you're coming from. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Bruce said, it's a fact. We said it very nicely. And I suppose Rabbi Norman had, I think that he had a session on the 10 Commandments, did he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Okay. If you didn't participate in that, look at the 10 Commandments and see if you can, differentiate between sins toward God and sins toward human. Because some people will say, you shall not murder. Oh, that's against God too. But there are some that are directly, that are about God. I'm not going to talk about the 10 Commandments. And these, I'm sure that probably Rabbi Norman is going to talk about it before Yom Kippur. And, the non-Jews, anti-Semitics, I usually said, oh, the Jews can do whatever they want, then they have Yom Kippur, and then they repent, and then God forgive them. Well, it doesn't work that way, because Yom Kippur is about sins between humans and God. That's what Yom Kippur is about. And what about if I just did a bad thing to Ricky? What shall I do? Yom Kippur is not going to help me. So my job is, and this is what we said, freedom of choice of what we do. So I'm saying, Ricky, play this with me. Ricky, I'm so sorry that I broke your window. Would you forgive me? Say no.
No.
Say no.
No.
The next day I come, Ricky, please forgive me for breaking your window.
No, you have to fix it.
Well, the third time, Ricky, please, can you forgive me for that? And you say no again. Then the problem is Ricky. I did what I needed to do. I asked for forgiveness, and I asked 3 times, and she didn't accept it. So the bad person now it's her. And that's how it works. So don't expect Yom Kippur to clean yourself, because that's only Ben Adam Lamakom. Ben Adam, I'm sorry I do this, I shouldn't. Ben Adam to God, to the source of life, to whatever you call God, your God, but not between us.
So what is, if we read the next verse 20?
Mhm. Besides, although you intended me harm, God intended it for good, so as to bring about the present result, the survival of many people.
Okay, this sort of answers
Yeah,
the
that's the
question.
intent.
It does. The human intent was there,
Yeah.
and God's intent was there.
Exactly.
Yes. So sometimes we have to step back a bit. Okay, let's go on to the next verse.
And so fear not, I will sustain you and your children. Thus he reassured them, speaking kindly to them.
So simply, what is
Oh,
Joseph saying?
It's gonna be fine.
It's going to be okay.
Don't worry.
What I like is
You are
in the entirety of what I call scripture, either in Hebrew, Aramaic, or in Greek, there are 365 verses between all of those places that say fear not, either in Greek, Aramaic, or Hebrew.
That's right.
There's one fear not for every day of the year. And I love that.
Cool, I like that.
I didn't know
Cool.
that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So,
And this is their fear not. This is that, hey, don't worry about this.
Well, what do we do in leap year?
We're cool, yeah.
Well, you may have to start over with number 1, kind of like Torah study. Go back to the beginning, Genesis 1:1.
Yeah, but leap year, we got an extra day. So we get to fear 1 day out of 4 years.
Not bad.
okay, verse 22. Let's go on. If somebody would care to read.
You want me to
Yes,
continue?
David. Yes, David, please.
Okay, let me do it. Okay, now therefore fear ye not, I shall sustain you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke kindly unto them. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house. And Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the 3rd generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were born unto Joseph's knees. And Joseph said unto the brethren, I die, but God will surely remember you and bring you up out of the land out of this land into the land which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And
Let's
Joseph
stop at
took an
that
oath-
point. Let's stop at that point. Any comments? Yes, Pastor Bruce.
I didn't realize this till just now because I'm looking at some different commentaries. I guess in Jewish tradition, the ideal lifespan is 120 years.
Mhm.
Is that correct? I mean,
Well, we say that.
For the
And we
patriot, yeah.
say during the birthday parties, we said live till 120.
yeah.
After
and
that, it's not there.
yeah, so anyway, I guess that's like when we get to Deuteronomy 34, it'll talk about Moses's life being 120.
Yes.
But in Egyptian, I guess the historical in Egyptology, I guess there's 27 places in Egyptian documents that the figure of 110 is mentioned as an ideal. So I thought that was interesting. I mean, I didn't know this till just like in the last
That's
week.
interesting.
And so I was like looking at this going, okay, so in the Jewish history, it's more of 120. In Egyptian history, it's more of 110. And in this passage, it says 110. And I just think that's interesting. That's all. It was just interesting.
Okay.
Isn't it 70 years? Because like in 83, we had a guy that did a bar mitzvah again because he was 13 years into his second.
I was there for that. I loved that. I was
Yeah.
in the temple
So it's-
center that day.
I think he was 83, which means
Yes.
70 years is now accepted as a good life.
Well, one of the Psalms says 70 and 80 if you have the strength. I mean, we've got that in there too.
The question I would have is when you pick a number like 110, 120, 200, 800, 600, whatever you want to, may you live to eternity. May you, or live through
Not eternity.
eternity.
Not eternity, not eternity. There is a point in which it's not eternity. It's not Ein Sof. Sorry.
No, I didn't mean it from that standpoint. I meant it from the standpoint when it's another way of the prayers that we say when people die, their children will pass on the values, the beliefs of the parents. They will be honored. That's the direction I was coming from.
Absolutely.
Okay, because then you can understand that we all know we're not going to be able to live forever.
Forever, right.
But the teachings, our values, things like that, what we hope for, we hope we have passed on to our children, and they will pass on those values to their children.
Right.
Maybe that's important. And when we look back on the different stories of the patriarchs, maybe they were getting after that too. That's all I'm saying.
That's their legacy.
Yeah.
That's what
The legacy that lives on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what they're getting onto here. Okay. Well, Chris, Don has had his hand up for a while. I'm going to let you. So let me jump to Don, and then you. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thanks. I just want to make a quick comment on the sentence that Joseph says to his brothers, "Fear not, I will nourish you and your little ones." That's so much compassion in that.
Yes.
It's rare that you see that. And then in the very next couple of sentences, we've suddenly compressed 3 generations of whatever went on into a couple of sentences. There's like nothing said about that, except 3 generations went by and Manasseh and Ephraim had some kids and they got blessed, and now we're done with that. It's all pretty compressed.
Well, he's saying that it's important to remember it's not just the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's to remember them for a long time, future generations, and they point out the names of successive generations here to emphasize that. So I think that it's a very strong thing. Also, this is the first time that we have seen the 3 patriarchs mentioned as one in one sentence. We always recite prayers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but this is the first time it appears in Torah. I just want to point that out. Okay, Chris, and then I know Michael, and then back to Dawn. Gail, was your hand up? Oh, okay.
I just was reading here what he said. So Joseph said to his brothers that he is about to die. And I'm wondering whose brothers are left at this point. Because he was the youngest one. Well, Benjamin being the youngest one, but Joseph was the kid of the group. And I wonder how many brothers, do we have any information on that? As to whose brothers were still standing?
You mean in addition to Machir and
Well,
the
those
other?
were I know they probably are called his brothers, but they are his grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
Okay, but you're talking about Joseph's other children.
No, it says here on 24.
No.
24.
Yeah, Jacob other two. Yeah.
On verse 24 it says, Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die. Oh, I'm sorry. I think we're still working on 22nd, didn't it?
Okay.
Oh, forgive me.
Okay, that's okay, Chris. Senior moment. I go through it all the time. Yeah,
Okay,
yes,
thank
Michael.
you. Sorry.
Yeah, we pass it on from one generation to another generation, but that's the whole idea of reading the 5 books of Moses every year. Go back, and this is what reminds us, and this is what keeps everything going from one generation to another. It's the consistent reading of the Torah.
Very
Yes.
good point. Yes,
Nice.
Don.
Yeah, I was going to tag on to my last comment that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are buried in Canaan. But Joseph, who spent his entire life, 110 years, well, most of it anyway, in Egypt, immersed in a culture that celebrates an afterlife. And it's such a dividing point here, because he's not going to be buried in his ancestors. He's going to be buried in a place where the afterlife is celebrated and accepted, but there's not a mention of that. I mean, it's such a point of departure right there.
Good point. Good point. We're going to come to that very shortly. And keep in mind what Donna is addressing, okay? Because there are certain aspects to this that become very important. So he has now said he's about to die, and he mentions the parents. And so if someone would care to read verse 25 and 26. We are going to finish the reading.
All right, so Joseph made the sons of Israel
Okay.
swear, saying, when God has taken notice of you, you shall carry up my bones from here. Joseph died at the age of 110 years, and he was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt.
Okay. Now, any discussion about the first half of what was read?
I still have that question.
Yes, go ahead.
I still have that question. Whose brothers are we talking about? Do we know?
Whose brother?
The brothers, yeah, it's at length. Joseph said to his brothers, he didn't say to my children or to my grandchildren. He said to my brothers, I am about to die. God is
Okay.
sure. And I'm thinking Joseph was probably the youngest one of the 12, or the youngest one minus Benjamin. But it's hard to think who would be left. If Joseph is 110, and what brothers is he talking about? Do we know?
No.
We don't. But does it necessarily mean brothers in the literal sense?
Literal sense. Okay. All right. I thought
Okay,
that too.
because that dovetails into another meaning. Yes, Pastor Bruce, and then Joanne.
I think that too, that if there were any brothers left, we don't really know. I don't think there's no way to know who was left and who wasn't. But
It's not
when you
mentioned.
think about brothers, the brothers had children.
Right.
Could be nephews.
Yeah, definitely.
My brother's
Yeah,
children.
family
It
left,
could
yeah.
be, I mean, I think you look at that word
Relative.
literally with relatives, and
You're right.
sometimes it can be my brother's kids,
Right.
those kind of things as well. But it does, we won't, I don't think we can have any knowledge of for sure who was there at that moment, who he was speaking to.
Knowing Joseph, what do you think, Joseph?
After Joanne.
The fact, knowing Joseph, when he uses the term brothers, let's say he's going to address, it
His
says
community,
the
his
children,
community, his children,
it says the
family.
children of et cetera, and then he says to his brothers.
Yeah.
Can you ever substitute the word brethren?
Brethren, yeah.
That's what
Well,
Pastor Bruce is getting after.
You're right.
So if the way this is being used is more than just the physical brothers, it's Am Yisrael.
Right.
Is another way of looking at it. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
Well, there are two places. The issue of brothers comes before he's going to die. Afterwards, he says, and Joseph swear to Bnei Israel,
Yes.
to the children of
the
Israel.
children of Israel.
And Israel, and Israel is Yaakov. And I have a request, which you don't have to follow. It's only a suggestion, but it will make me very happy.
Right.
We don't say the Israelites, and we should not say the Hebrews. What we should say is the children of Israel. For once, we are all included there. The Hebrews is a narrator talking about someone else. And the Israelites is a new thing. It's much more late. And the issue of Bnei Israel is what we, the Jews, I shouldn't use Jews, what in the Torah we are called, and include yourself into it. It says in Sinai, you have to hear this as if you were there. And in Pesach, in Passover, we say that, include yourself. When we say that, that in America there was slavery, how do we say it? We enslave. We don't say the Americans enslave. We don't say we are mistreating the people that are coming from the border. We say we. Even if we don't do it, it doesn't matter. We. It's like saying we the Americans, we the Brits, we the French. No one says, if you're a French, you don't say the French are doing it. So, Bnei Israel, welcome. We are all there and we are included. So when we talk about Bnei Israel, we don't do it in third, you don't do it like a narrator, they. We don't do they, we do we. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gail.
Yeah, well, that goes back to my point. It's us, not them.
Us.
It's us.
That is correct.
Uh-huh.
That's correct.
Absolutely.
I do have a question
So,
for Rabbi Mary, though. Rabbi?
What?
Mary?
Say it again, Gail.
Oh, Mary, I have a question for you. They say that at the very end, they said that he was put in a coffin. And if I'm reading that word right,
Excuse me, we're just discussing the first part of this.
sorry.
The first one. We're going to get to that.
Yeah.
And that's a very important thing. Gail, I'm going to call on you when we get to that. Okay? Because we're jumping ahead and we're going to lose the train of thought here. What do you think about the phrase in 25, when God has taken notice of you, you shall carry up my bones from here? What do you think about that phrase? And yes, Joanne, I apologize. You had your hand up before.
I guess he's predicting future. When I read that, it just felt like future, and it did mean the Exodus, but he was, when God has noticed you, but it's like when the time is right and it's a necessity, I will be with you. But the thing I had my hand up for is, it says, Joseph made the sons of Israel. And Rabbi Miriam was saying, could we say
Yes.
that?
Yes.
But I would like to say the brethren and sistren of Israel, the sons and daughters of Israel.
Very good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Very good way of putting it. Suzanne, your hand has been up for a while, I think.
Yeah, I had, what I wanted to say, and I guess it's now said, I wanted to comment on 25 that this was a prophetic verse.
Yes.
Of Moses and the Exodus.
Excellent point. Excellent. Anything else before we go on to verse 26 to discuss verse 26? Okay, we're still on 25.
Yes.
Okay, Chris.
Yes, I think it reminds me on 25 also that when Isaac died, he made Joseph promise that he will take his bones and be buried in the cave of Machpelah, where was his wife. And I got the feeling that Joseph felt like, I don't belong here. I need to go where my father bought that land for us to bury our family. So that's the only thing I can think about. Make sure my bones goes with you or take me away with you. Right.
And as we will find out, that doesn't quite happen.
Right.
Okay, it'll be a little change on the theme.
Right.
So now let's go on to verse 26. And Gail, would you repeat your statement about the coffin in Egypt?
You're muted,
muted,
Gail.
Gail.
Gail, you're muted.
Yeah. Gail, you're muted.
Gail, you're muted.
I know, I've lost my connection. Sorry.
Oh, okay, there you go.
No, my question was, they said that he was buried in a coffin, and that word is Aron, and that's the ark. And comment, please?
No, that's the only time that it's used in that context. Mary?
Well,
Rabbi Mary?
I believe that that Yosef, after living so many years in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, he adhered to a lot of rules or traditions of the Egyptians. So embalmment is completely no-no in Judaism. And Aaron means different things. We call Aaron a Kodesh. It's not just the ark, it's Aaron a Kodesh. The word Aaron means closet.
Right.
You know, I put something in the closet. Right. And here is used as Aaron for the death. You need to remember that we have rules that came after the Torah, that are Talmudic, that are explanations from rabbis. And those became more of the rules. And there, for example, saying, you know, you have to pray in front of the dead body, or you have to wash the body, things like that don't appear. It doesn't appear how you bury a person. We don't really find out. We know about the fathers and mothers that they have a cave. They don't talk how they put them in the cave. Maybe they just put them in the cave. So this is a Egyptian tradition that it does, and it's weird. And I don't know that it appears anywhere else. And embalmment it's, you know, they put the, Yachnetu is not the embalmment that they use these days, but, you know, the,
turban?
like no, that they put all over.
Shroud.
Like the mummies.
The shroud.
The mummies.
Mummification, right? No.
No, that it looks like toilet paper, I'm sorry.
Okay.
All around. Bandages. That's how the Egyptians did. And the Egyptians did other stuff that we're not going to mention. But that's Yachnetu. That's what they did. And we say embalmment. The issue is to preserve the body. No Judaism has that. It's right. Like Christianity, dust to dust. You were born here, you go back there to the same place. So again, Gail, I think that he was operating from the Egyptian way of doing stuff.
Okay.
They are there.
Yes, Don.
You're
Don,
muted.
Don, I think you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, I would yeah, that's the way it seemed to me, because it's almost certain that that coffin was treated as a vessel, because and the Egyptians used to paint the coffins with figures of slaves to as assistants.
Sarcophagus.
Next life, and you know, they equipped the burial area with all sorts of sustenance and you know, Swiss Army knives and everything that the deceased might need.
But it is sort of a sarcophagus. It's not really a
right.
A coffin.
Yeah. So that, I mean,
yeah.
So the chapter ends right there, but you know, that coffin word, what's the Hebrew for coffin?
Our own.
Well, yeah,
Aaron.
that begs a whole slew of images what that must have
Sure.
been.
Sure. What I'd like to do is to read a commentary from the Talmud. Okay. This is a discussion of the coffin and the concept of the ark. The word for both is Aaron, a word nowhere else in the Bible used for coffin. Why? So that in their wanderings through the desert, the children of Israel would carry with them both the Aaron of Joseph and the Aaron containing the tablets of the law, to show that in one Aaron was a man who fulfilled the commandments contained in the other. The Torah is indeed in the reach of man.
I like that. Yeah.
We have concluded the reading. There are many more commentaries that we don't have time for, but I would like to use those for purposes of discussion next week so that we can get a little better understanding from other perspectives. These are all from different rabbis. They're all commentaries on what we've done. And then to tie all the books together, and as I pointed out in our other discussions, what are the lessons that we learn? And then how all of this dovetails right into the 10 Commandments. Yes, Rabbi Miri.
Okay, when we finish a book, and we are
Chazak,
doing it.
Chazak,
Finish a
Chazak,
book.
Chazak.
We say chazak, chazak, v'nitchazek. So please join me in chazak,
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 Chazak.
v'nitchazek.
Chazak.
And it's strong, strong,
Be strong.
and we are going to be strong.
It's taken 3 years to get to, well, we're going to drag it out a little more because to get to the honest 3 years. But basically, there's, I think the discussions that we're going to have, we have covered a lot of these over the past 3 years, but I want to try to bring all of our individual discussions together, because now when we put those together, we're going to see that what we have been reading has some deeper meanings. Okay? We've touched on them as we've gone along, but not in as an entirety.